Recently did a very popular video on Rachmaninoff and why the critics misunderstood him in the mid-20th century and how that's changed. Now, most of the comments were very positive. They say they love him, they think he's a great composer. But there were still some who say, I just don't get it. And that's why I think Rachmaninoff can be dangerous. Dangerous to you as a performer or just dangerous to you as a listener. And it's not because of the emotion in the music. But if it's not that, then what is it? I did an old video called Dangerous Bach, and in that video I talked about the danger there is that there are too few markings, so composers have to make decisions on dynamics and articulations, and that can lead you into several different types of traps. You can check that one out. With Rachmaninoff, I think the danger is in a different place. Now, if any of you have seen the movie or the play Amadeus, you may remember that there's a part where Mozart conducts some of his music, and I think it's the emperor comes up to him afterwards and says, wonderful, but just too many notes. Well, it's meant kind of as a joke in the movie or play, but with Rachmaninoff, actually, this could partially be the problem. Rachmaninoff's music is very thick, whether you're talking about orchestral music or even solo piano music. It has so much there. Now, Rachmaninoff does provide the performer with many, many markings, and you should try to follow them to the best of your ability, but with that overload of notes and textures, it can be hard to make really smart decisions that project the image or idea that Rachmaninoff's trying to give the listener. And as a performer, what happens a lot of times is you, first of all, if you're not saying, I just need to get all these notes out, once you get beyond that, it's still so much that it creates an ambiguity. The texture's so thick. And what happens is that emotionality that people complain about actually is not the problem, it's a symptom of the performance. So if you've ever played or heard Rachmaninoff's music, you can sense right away that there's a lot going on. But the trick is here, even though we can say it's a thick texture isn't a single texture. Rachmaninoff often writes a lot of inner melodies, and sometimes they rise and fall in importance in true contrapuntal style. And what the performer needs to know is what is important. See, if every single line sings, if every single melody sings, then nothing sings. So for example, with the piano, pianists are often tempted to step down on that pedal and keep it down too long and not worry too much about the clarity, when they might want to approach it more like a Bach fugue and make sure that every single line is coming out clearly before they add the pedal back in, because you definitely do need to use pedal in Rachmaninoff, and not just the sustain pedal, but also the sostenuto pedal maybe, and also the soft pedal for sure. And with orchestra, that thick texture, if you get those conductors, which I've worked with many times, and they start to do this, where they're mixing a big vat of deliciousness in front of you, it doesn't tell the instrumentalists very much about what they should do and what's important for the audience to hear. And that's really the conductor's job. So perhaps if we treated Rachmaninoff with a little bit more discipline, a little bit more contrapuntal discipline, bringing out those important lines, but also making sure that what needs to shine shines and what doesn't is heard clearly, but doesn't overtake the important parts. If we did that, I think he would have more of a lean sound. Now, of course, the counterpoint with Rachmaninoff is not Bach-style counterpoint, and it's not academic counterpoint. But if we approach it with a rigor and discipline, we have a chance of making the lines clear. And then I think what you'll find is that with performances like this, the emotion is much more naturally expressive, and it doesn't feel heavily applied like too much makeup or a thick coat of paint after the fact. Here's a recording I did with pianist I-Ling Chen of the last movement of the cello sonata, and even something as simple as this, you'll see that you've got a melody in the right hand of the piano, and then the cello comes in a little bit later, almost in canon, and this builds. While that's going on, there's a lot going on texturally as well, and even something implied in the left hand, and let's listen to it now. what does this mean for performers? Well, I think that even if you're talking about a full orchestra, we should always be thinking like a chamber musician. What does my voice do or add to the lines? And even if you're a single pianist, you need to think like a chamber musician as well, but your fingers are the individual instruments. Performers and conductors need to manage the density of the music. They need to think, what is the foreground? What should recede? What is structural? Well, these questions might lead you to ask, is this like a design flaw? Is this a fault of Rachmaninoff in the way he wrote something? And I think that that's the wrong question to ask. The correct question to ask is, what are my responsibilities as a performer with this music? And as a listener, you will know the difference. Even if you don't know exactly why it sounds better, you'll know that it does sound better because things will make sense to your ear. What we definitely don't want to do is let a luxurious, glorious sound replace the structural clarity of the music. Because look, that's why I think some very intelligent and smart, well-versed music lovers and great performers sometimes can get lost. They just find themselves completely surrounded by a gorgeous sound, but not something that makes sense to them. Some questions you could ask as a performer or a listener: is there a line for me to follow here? Am I sacrificing clarity just for warmth? And are those tremendous climaxes earned? And how are they earned? So, like I asked in that recent video I did on Rachmaninoff, are the critics right? Is Rachmaninoff actually overly sentimental? See, I think Rachmaninoff only becomes that way when performers just give up deciding. If they approach it with some rigor, you'll get that full romantic sweep, but it will sound natural and it will be logical to your brain. You'll hear the different lines and you'll understand what they mean. You won't just be enveloped by a pot of honey. So yes, Rachmaninoff can be a very dangerous composer, both for performers and for listeners, if they mistake emotion for meaning. But I'm curious to know what you think. Let me know in the comments, is there a particular performance of Rachmaninoff that you can point to that really left an impression on you in the way that we're talking about today? Let us know. I think it'd be an interesting discussion. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget, you can also become a member of the channel. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.